are you doing here?
Getting a gun for protection.
Aim for the lungs, straight through the rib cage.
I just don't think that he deserves to live after doing that.
I'm concerned about my daughter's welfare. She does not understand this kind of violence.
Either there or the heart, but the best thing to do is hit the lungs.
We knew this is somebody that had a knowledge of police work.
Pushed me away at a young age, Pop. I wanted to make you proud of me. I let you down. I'm sorry for that. I got something I gotta do.
Serial killers like to kill. They're hunters. They hunt humans.
Granted, it could happen anywhere, but it happened here.
How many will he take before he leaves Gainesville?
I have nothing further to say. Thank you and good day.
That's it? You can't answer any questions for me?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry.
August 26, 1990, Gainesville, Florida, 4 p.m. After a long day at work, Officer Ray Barber was eager to get home to his family when he received a last-minute phone call for yet another noise complaint from the nearby college. He set out, expecting to shut down a student party, hoping to be home within the hour. Officer Barber drove up to the University of Florida and met the maintenance man in the courtyard, along with Christina Powell's, one of the residents' parents. The maintenance man explained that nobody had seen Christina or her roommate, Sonia Larson, since that Saturday. Sonia's parents had been trying to get in touch with her, but she wasn't answering her phone. He decided to see for himself. Leading him up to the apartment, the two men tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. After trying several methods and using several keys to open the door, the men decided to just break open the door. The putrid smell hit Officer Barber immediately, and then he saw it. On the waterbed, the crimson-stained bare body of a young woman was arranged in a compromised position, her areolas removed. On the stairs, the second woman was positioned in a similar state. Horrified, the maintenance man ran outside and threw up. More contained, Officer Barber told the frightened parents it would be best if they stayed back. What would be referred to as a double homicide happened between 11:33 p.m. on August 23rd and 4 p.m. on August 26th, according to Lieutenant Sadie Darnell, a media spokesperson for the case. But the crime wasn't silent. Neighbor George Michael Faith reported that on Friday he heard a shower, loud music, followed by a loud bang. He assumed the girls were hanging up pictures on the wall. Investigator Don Maines found evidence that the suspect had potentially wedged the door open with a screwdriver. The bodies had been cleaned, but evidence showed duct tape was used to bind the victims. According to Don, they suspected it was an effort to keep investigators from discovering DNA, blood types, fingerprints. The young woman had promising futures ahead of them. Sonia Larson was in school for education. She was passionate about taking care of children and wanted to open her very own daycare center one day.
Oh, Sonia was a delight to be a mother to. She was every mother's wish for a child. Bright in school, great grades, didn't have to tell her to study.
When she got accepted into the university, her mother, Ada Larson, was excited. She wanted her daughter to live on campus, but all the dorm rooms were full. They had to turn to an outside apartment building, the very apartment where she was found. Sonia's roommate, Christina Powell, was a very positive young woman, excited to become a Florida Gator, according to her family. She received a gator necklace as a graduation gift and would never take it off. Christina liked to play sports, and she would write for the school's literature magazine. She wanted to become an architect so she could design houses for low-income families. She was excited about life. She wanted to improve the world, high school coach Ted Pina said in an article with the Sun Centennial. Sadly, these girls' lives were taken away too quick, and it wasn't long before another life was also stolen. August 27th, 1990, Gainesville, Florida, 12:30 a.m. Deputy Gail Barber of the Alachua County Sheriff's Office was spending time with her husband, Officer Ray Barber, after he had gotten back from a rough shift at the university. It couldn't have been a coincidence when she received a phone call to check up on Krista Hoyt, who hadn't shown up to work that night. Krista was a 19-year-old Santa Fe Community College student who worked part-time as a records clerk at the sheriff's office. The two women knew each other very well. Deputy Barber and Officer Keith O'Hara knocked on the door to no answer. Perhaps Krista was late for work, Deputy Barber thought. She may have already left. But she noticed Krista's car parked nearby. She tried the door. It was locked. The building manager heard the commotion and came out to investigate. He then guided the two to the back of the apartment, where they saw the damaged gate and that the chain link fence was down. Something was wrong. They tried the sliding glass door at the back to find it was also locked. After peering in, Deputy Barber witnessed the horrifying sight. A bare body sat slumped on the bed in a pool of blood, Son's head. Hearing water running in the apartment, she suspected the culprit was still inside. They needed backup. Now with backup, the officers entered Krista's home. Slowly moving in case the perpetrator was still inside, they staked out the place. Turning into the bedroom, what they found stopped the investigators in their tracks. Krista's missing head on the bookshelf, staring right at them. Her breasts had been mutilated, her areolas sitting on the bed next to the body. With one final check under the bed, it was confirmed the killer was long gone. Police Chief Waylon Clifton arrived with the backup, eager to find out if there was a link to the other murders. And there was. Underwear was missing, a knife with a 4 to 6 inch blade was used on all three college girls, the use of adhesive tape was evident but removed, and body parts were gone. Krista's mother, Diana Hoyt, explained her feelings in an ABC interview. "My husband would just sit and say, 'Just tell me she died right away. Tell me she did not suffer.' These police officers knew Krista. They told Gary she had passed right away from the first stroke of the knife, which was the truth. But there were many hours before that." Not only were University of Florida students victimized, but now a student from another school was targeted. The safe college town was now dubbed Grizzly Gainesville. It was time to create a police task force to figure out who the perpetrator was. August 28, 1990, Gainesville, Florida, 7 p.m. 2 days later, 23-year-old roommates Tracy Inez Polis and Manuel R. Taboada went missing. Worried that she wasn't able to contact her sister, Lori Leahy asked a mutual friend, Christopher Pascuala, to check up on Tracy. She had seen a police report on the news about the other murders and told Tracy to call her in the morning. But there was no call. After having the utilities manager open the door with the master key, they were hit with a horror that seemed all too familiar. Lying in the hallway between the two bedrooms was Tracy's body. Frantically, Christopher called Lori and she picked up the phone to a blood-curdling scream. "It's Tracy! It's Tracy!" Police found out that she had been treated similarly to the other victims. She had been cleaned, and there was evidence duct tape was used to bind her mouth and wrists. Manuel was found on his bed, and it was clear that he had put up a fight. Tracy, a former prom queen, wanted to become a lawyer someday. She and Lori were as close as sisters could get. Growing up, they would create dances, and Tracy was even the maid of honor at Lori's wedding. Manuel was a strong, athletic football player and often acted in plays put on by his school drama classes. He wanted to become an architect one day. After this third murder case, police phone lines were swamped with calls from concerned parents who hadn't heard from their children in a couple of hours. TV stations received calls wondering if they should take their kids out of school. 24-hour police escorts and increased security were implemented. After 5 college students were found dead in their apartments, it was now confirmed that they were the targets. Only now, there was a male victim.
we're all buddying up, we're getting together so that we can, you know, like safety in numbers, but it's really scary.
It was almost like a hurricane was coming, where people run in and they buy out all the bread and milk. All the locks at all the hardware stores were sold out.
Who would commit such a twisted crime? Eyes turned to Edward Lewis Humphrey, a violent student who used to live in the same apartment as Tracy and Manuel. He had the appearance of a killer after all. He was tall, and his face had been mutilated from a car crash. Edward was asked to leave the apartment complex not long before the incident after a fight with his roommates. Edward was also said to have gone off of medication for his manic depressive disorder at the time. Coincidentally, he had recently been arrested in Colorado for disorderly conduct and was placed in custody on August 30th after a violent argument with his grandmother. Despite no evidence directly linking him to the Gainesville murders, he was imprisoned as a suspect. The only evidence against Edward was that the suspect had type B blood while he had type A. Edward was put in the state prison for 14 months on assault charges before being exonerated. On August 28, 1990, two men were walking towards the woods behind Archer Road, one of the men matching the description of a recent bank robbery. When the police ordered the pair to freeze, the suspect booked it towards the forest. After losing him, the police managed to find his campsite and seized the following items: stolen money, a dye pack, a 9mm Taurus pistol loaded with hollow point bullets, a ski mask, gloves that were used in the bank robbery, a screwdriver, a tape recorder, and an audio tape. Unbeknownst to them, the audio tape would be the key to deciphering this twisted case. But it took police almost a year before they finally listened to it. August 31st, 1990 was Labor Day weekend. Thousands of students left Gainesville and over 700 did not return, choosing to drop out of school for their own safety.
School is hard enough to think about all the classes you have to take and to have to worry about some maniac at the same time. It's just too much.
My mom called me this morning and told me to come home now.
And I'm hoping that they discover who's doing this by the weekend. And if that's not the case, then I'm going to bring my daughter home till this is solved.
Meanwhile, the culprit behind the murders was closer than they thought. August 9th, 1990, University Inn, Gainesville, Florida. A man checked into the University Inn under the name Michael Kennedy. Standing in his hotel room, he rolled up a joint and blew into the mirror. As the smoke trickled away, it became clear that it was going to happen. The man that went by Michael Kennedy had been on the run for a long time. He had recently been let out of jail and spent his time on the road, robbing banks, burglarizing homes, and violating unsuspecting women. Out of jail, July 1988, he was living with his parents. The man never got along with his father, and tensions were always high. It hit an all-time high on May 18th when he came home drunk one night and started yelling at his mother. His father gave him a look he didn't like, so he flung a chair at the wall. His father began a shootout, and he responded, getting his father in the stomach and between the eyes. Realizing what he had done, he ran away, the cops following. He ended up in Kansas City at the Best Western Motel with only a guitar and a tote bag. He robbed the house of Michael Kennedy, who was away on a trip. He took 2 handguns and identification papers of Michael's deceased son, Michael Kennedy Jr. Michael continued his robberies, hiding in the woods, and eventually staying in hotels under his new alias. Opting to spend time in Sarasota, Florida, Michael changed his appearance and began using the money accumulated from the robberies to purchase drugs, a gun, and fancy clothes. He began dating girls while quietly continuing his crimes. To explain the money he made, he claimed to be a trucker who had sold a country song for $10,000. On August 23rd, he checked out of the University Inn in Gainesville and set up camp in a wooded area, 2 miles from all the crime scenes. The tent was on the eastern side of the Southwest 34th Street at the intersection of Archer Road, about 250 yards behind the Bennigans, where Manuel Taboada worked as a bartender. At 6:30 p.m., he purchased a tent for $20.08 at Walmart, but also shoplifted a screwdriver, 2 pairs of black isotoner gloves, and duct tape. At the same time, Sonia Larson and Christina Powell purchased $51.21 worth of items, 11 registers away. During the early morning hours of August 24th, the man entered the apartment of Sonia Larson and Christina Powell, using the rear door. He was armed. In the apartment, the man SA'd Christina, who was asleep on the couch, and killed her and Sonia, who was asleep in her bed. Before leaving the scene, he rearranged the bodies. He blacked out for a while and found himself in the kitchen, eating an apple and then a banana. On his way home, he found Christina's remains in a baggie on his person. Becoming nauseous, he puked and threw the bag into the gutter. One day later, on Saturday 25th, he targeted his third victim. Krista Hoyt was playing racquetball with her friend Paul Daniel Schwartz that day. Meanwhile, the intruder broke in using a screwdriver to break open the sliding door at the rear of her apartment. Armed, he patiently waited for Krista to get home, around 10 to 11 p.m., and snuck up behind her. He bound her and proceeded to SA her in the same way as Christina, ending her with his knife. To finish, he placed Krista's head on a bookshelf in her room. His next targets were Tracy Paulus and Manuel Taboada 2 days later. The man decided to scope out the house beforehand. Looking through the window, he saw that Tracy was lying on her bed, chatting with a girlfriend on the phone. "I wish Manuel was here. I'm worried about these murders." "That's right, I'll be okay. It's just sort of spooky, you know." Tracy's cat noticed the intruder and hissed. "Is anyone there?" she asked. Verifying nobody was there, Tracy double-checked the lock on the window and closed the curtains. Still uneasy, she slipped into bed but kept the table light on. Around 2:45 a.m., Manuel returned from his bartending job. After waking Tracy up to let her know he was home, Manuel crawled into his own bed. Once he made sure the house was asleep, the intruder broke into the Gatorwood apartment. The first person he saw was Manuel, asleep in his bedroom. He stabbed the young man, waking him up. There was a struggle, but he was able to subdue the younger man. The commotion alerted Tracy, but she began to flee when she saw the gory scene. She slammed her bedroom door and attempted to lock it, but he broke open the door. She was then bound and SA'd. Her final words were, "You're the one, aren't you?" On August 28, 1990, the man was walking with another dealer towards his campsite in the woods, behind Archer Road. Seeing the police, he ran for it. Unbeknownst to him, the police were soon to discover his campsite. That Labor Day weekend, the man robbed several houses to find another gun. On September 2nd, he staked out a supermarket and busted in. Meanwhile, Officer Copeland was called from a local restaurant to check out the save and pack. She arrived just as the suspect was leaving in his car. Unholstering her revolver, she told him to get out. He held his own weapon back at her, and she immediately gave chase. 2 more cop cars cornered the suspect, joining the chase. After smashing into a mobile home, the car drew its last breath. Escaping the wreck, the runaway jumped a fence and continued on his way. Having successfully fled, he laid low for a bit, only committing burglaries. On September 7, 1990, after having robbed a grocery store in Ocala, Florida, he was hit with the police again. A voice told him, "This ain't gonna go down right." After being followed by several police cars, he eventually panicked and decided to go on foot, ending up in an insurance office. The man ran through the back door to an alley. This was where he fell to his knees in the middle of the flea market. Police knew they found the robber, but not that they found the Gainesville Ripper. Investigators knew who was committing the burglaries and armed robberies, but the question of who the murderer was still lingered. After a phone call from a detective in Louisiana, the Murder Task Force decided to check out a similar case from Shreveport in 1989. On November 6, 1989, Julie Grissom, her father Tom Grissom, and her 8-year-old nephew Sean Grissom were found lifeless in their home in Shreveport, Louisiana. Julie was a marketing student at the Louisiana State University of Shreveport and modeled clothes at the mall as a part-time job. She was found clothless on her bed with at least 3 stab wounds. She had been SA'd and doused in vinegar. Evidence that duct tape was used to bind her was found, and she was in a similar compromising position as the other female victims. Tom Grissom, who worked as an AT&T supervisor, was described as friendly and was battling throat cancer. He was found in the backyard, and it appeared he had been stricken while cooking steaks on the barbecue. Sean was a 3rd grader at Turner Elementary and was visiting his family for the weekend. He was found in the family room with a knife wound. Neighbor Bob Coyle later discovered the bodies. It was a nightmare over there. Just a bad situation. You just don't think about that happening in a neighborhood like this. The perpetrator had tried very hard to cleanse the scene of any DNA, but traces of blood type B were found, a match to the evidence in Gainesville. Investigator Don Maines called it a revelation in the case. These murders had to be connected, and Shreveport resident Cindy Jurasich had a hunch they were. Her thoughts turned to a man who spent time at the same church as her family. He had told her on the day of the Grissom family murders that he was going to leave Shreveport, and when she saw the reports of the murders in Gainesville, Cindy couldn't get him off her mind. She held the feeling until she couldn't anymore, and shared her thoughts with police in November of 1990, and brought up the name Danny Rolling. Police were adamant that they had already caught the killer, but when their eyes turned to Danny Rolling, the case became more clear. He had been convicted of several cases of armed robbery, and he could have been responsible for the bank robbery that happened on the day Krista Hoyt's body was found. It was time to reassess the evidence, and finally listen to the tapes. On the tape, a man was singing a song called Mystery Rider, where he described being a killer and a drifter. He also spoke what seemed to be final words to his family, feeling remorseful for his past. At the end of the tape, he confirmed all of the suspicions when he signed off with the name, Danny Harold Rolling.
Well, I'm going to sign off for a little bit. I got something I got to do.
Born in Shreveport, Louisiana, to Police Lieutenant James Rolling and Claudia Rolling, Danny and his brother grew up in an unstable household. James would often yell at the family, sometimes resorting to violence. As a child, Danny would find comfort in Marvel Comics, spending days drawing the heroes. At 15, he began writing his own song lyrics and enjoyed the escape music gave him. Danny was rejected by his classmates and was failing out of school. When approached by his teacher for counseling, James allegedly dismissed it, saying it was unnecessary. James's temper was known by others, but he was a veteran of the Korean War and highly regarded. Danny's cousin, Charles Strozier, told the South Florida Sun Centennial, "It was like a switch. It would be on one minute, off the next." In a letter to the court, Claudia wrote, "Danny was abused from the day he was born. My husband was jealous of him. He never wanted me to hold him or show love in him. He was told from the time he could understand that he would be dead or in jail before he reached the age of 15. Danny's petty crimes began at a young age, including voyeurism and theft. The first time Danny was locked up was at the age of 16, but this didn't deter him. Danny gave his father an ultimatum: either allow him to enlist in the army at 17, or he would run away. His father agreed, and despite not passing the Navy test, he did join the Air Force. It didn't last long. Just before the Vietnam War, Danny was busted for being on drugs and arrested. After being discharged from the Air Force in 1972, Danny felt worthless. He was supposed to live with his grandfather, but a detour happened when he was brought to church by a man. He felt a deep connection and later got baptized. As Danny became more involved with the church, he began driving the Sunday school bus. He was able to share his passion for music by playing guitar at the old folks' home. He would also go downtown to sing hymns. Feeling like he was missing something in his life, Danny eventually asked God for a wife, and shortly after, his first wife, Omitha Ann Halko, joined the church. Infatuated, they married 4 months later on September 6, 1974, and had a daughter named Kylie Danielle. But their relationship was far from perfect. Danny desired more physical intimacy than she could provide and began watching women again. He was caught once during his wife's pregnancy by officers, who brought him back to her to confess. Omitha allegedly cheated on him as well, and left Danny for her high school sweetheart. After a violent altercation, Omitha sent in the divorce papers. Shortly after, he committed his first SA. Danny took his divorce very hard, his mother Claudia said in an interview. The sheriff came to our door with the separation papers and tried to hand them to Danny. Danny got a glance at them, and he started screaming and running around and around the house. Danny began robbing liquor stores in Shreveport, then Mississippi, Alabama, and eventually Georgia. There, he was arrested and sent to Muskogee County Jail. He spent the remaining years in and out of jail for armed robberies and on the run from the law. In May 1986, Danny was sent to Parchman Prison in Mississippi, where he spent a lonely time in solitary confinement for what he was told was 240 days. The cell was disgusting, filled with sewage that seeped into the ceiling. It was there when he began talking to himself and seeing the dark alter egos, Enad and Gemini. Danny described Gemini in his book as darkest night, evil, destructive, powerful, your wildest nightmare, come to haunt your dreams with screams, demon, grim reaper, murderer, bloodthirsty, psychotic, terrible. Gemini came from all the hatred, all the pain, everything sick and insane that had happened. He claimed that Gemini called him to get revenge, one innocent soul for every year he was imprisoned. Danny was paroled on July 29, 1988, under the condition that he would return to Shreveport to live with his parents. Tensions between Danny and James did not cease, however, and even family, friends, and neighbors took notice. In November of 1989, the Grissom family was suspiciously murdered, no suspect in sight. On the day of May 18, 1990, when the tension escalated and Danny pulled a gun on James, Danny's aunt, Agnes Mitchell, took special notice. The last time I seen Danny was the Sunday afternoon that I took him to look for a truck, because Danny was moving. James Harrell talked to Claudia that day and threatened Danny. He threatened to kill him. That was the day of the shooting. And Claudia called Artie before it happened and said something bad is going to happen here. I feel it. He was on the run after breaking his parole, under a new name, and would soon commit the heinous Gainesville murders. Why the quiet college town of Gainesville? Gemini allegedly told him it was the place. January 1991, Gainesville, Florida. Now in jail and the number one suspect for the Gainesville killings, Danny Rolling knew he was done for. Prison officials ensured that all evidence was correctly given and analyzed to compare to the DNA samples found at the crime scenes. A tooth was extracted by the prison dentist and hair was sent to the FDLE. New hair and blood samples were also requested, as well as his personal belongings to be checked in a Jacksonville laboratory. By November, Danny was formally charged with the 5 murders and 3 SAs. On February 13, 1994, Danny Rolling pleaded guilty to the charges. He addressed the court with the following.
Your Honor, I've been running from first one thing and then another all my life. But there are some things that you just can't run from, and this being one of those.
At his trial, several psychiatrists testified to Danny's mental illness. According to Dr. Robert Sadoff, Danny didn't have dissociative identity disorder, but possession syndrome. According to psychologist Harry Kropp, who examined Danny in January of 1991, he had a borderline personality that was characterized by violent mood swings, impulsive and self-destructive behavior, narcissism, and antisocial feelings. He said Danny knew right from wrong and had an incredible amount of underlying anger. Dr. Robert Sadoff agreed that Danny was sane but mentally ill. He doesn't know who he is. At one point, he is a Robin Hood or Jesse James. At another point, he is the church-going person who drives a Sunday school bus. Along with the 4 life sentences and 170 years for the armed robberies, Danny was given 7 more life sentences, 100 more years, and 5 death penalties. Danny Rolling hung his head and accepted his fate. He spent 2 minutes apologizing, but the damage was already done. I heard the words, Ada, Sonia Larson's mother said, but the actions spoke loud enough. I think he felt sorry he was caught, not that he did it. And if he was out right now, I think he'd do it again. Diana, Krista Hoyt's stepmother, exclaimed. Tracy's sister, Lori, found peace despite her reluctance to witness the execution. Once everything quiets down, I'll think about Tracy and I'll be sad. But right now, he's gone. He's gone. Danny Rolling was sentenced to the death penalty by lethal injection that was carried out on October 25, 2006. After his final meal of lobster tail, butterfly shrimp, baked potato, strawberry cheesecake, and sweet tea, he sang a biblical hymn that he wrote himself. He who flung the stars into the heavens above, created the oceans, the mountains, the eagles, and the doves. None greater than thee, O Lord, none greater than thee. Angels bow before you and fold their wings. Lift your voice and praise the King of Kings. At 6:03, he received the lethal injection, and by 6:11, he drew his final breath after 4,571 days on death row. Shortly before he died, he confessed to the Shreveport murders in the form of a handwritten note given to his spiritual advisor, Reverend Mike Hudspeth. In response to Danny's death, Ricky Paula said, "I'm thrilled. I've been waiting to do this for 16 years. I hate to sound coarse about it, but that's how I feel." Diana Hoyt also expressed her thoughts. "I don't think there's any closure for something like this, but there is gratification to know that he can no longer think about the killings and get pleasure out of thinking about what he did. I really do believe that he deserves to be put to death. I want it to be over." State Senator Rod Smith, the former prosecution who secured the death sentence, was disappointed at how long it took for the execution to take place. His reasoning was that Danny confessed to the killings and there was sufficient DNA evidence. To honor the victims' memories, the 1990 Student Memorial Scholarship and Sonia Larson Memorial Scholarship were created. These scholarships have provided more than 300 students nearly $500,000 in financial awards at the University of Florida. The names of the victims are written on a wall near campus with the words, "Remember 1990." A tragic event that shook the city of Gainesville can never be forgotten. Students of the University of Florida will always feel a connection to the victims, and the families will always be affected. For more twisted stories, don't forget to subscribe.